Alright, time for another draft science video presentation. Just in time. I was going to talk about the double slit, and, I've given an illustration of the bad physics for bent space, for the energy formula, and now the double slit shows up just in time. A perfect example of absolute garbage. Just terrible physics, terrible science. This is just propaganda. Religious organizations have created videos that are more consistent with the truth than this piece of garbage. Dr. Quantum, the cartoon character, is doing a better job of describing reality than this scientist. These are supposed to be Fermilab, okay? This is a video produced by Fermilab. This was before the LHC, this was the most successful, it might be the biggest also, accelerator in the world. This is the home of particle physics before the LHC. And they can't describe a two-slit experiment accurately. You trust them. They found the quarks. They found a whole bunch of this stuff. All of this crap physics was found at these places, and you trust them. They can't describe a two-slit experiment accurately. And you trust them to tell you what's in the cosmos and what's in the tiniest things in atoms. And they can't describe a two-slit experiment correctly, accurately, anywhere close to the truth. The nonsense in this video, just every sentence, every bit of it is garbage. It is junk science. It's pseudoscience. Flat earthers make more credible videos than this. There's no reason for them to have these silly, distorted views. Nobody even should. They're not even going to show you a good photograph of, distortion in some kind of bizarre circumstance, some coincidence. They're not going to show you anything that's even close to a good piece of evidence persuading you of this nonsense. It is so bad. I should go on a hunger strike. I should protest. I should do so. And this will be a good test, because if the critics can't concede, this doesn't do their side any good. This doesn't make you look very credible as arguers for or defenders of the truth. It really is just, this is just something to overcome. It really should. This should be taken off the internet. It's science, okay? It's not some free speech thing. It's not some sort of blah blah blah. This is supposed to be science, government financed science. It should have something called a little tiny shred of integrity, and it has no integrity. There's no reason to save this. This is just propaganda. The worst kind of lies, frankly. If something hasn't been true for 200 years, and you keep arguing it's true, we're way past this being, this experiment has way past being mysterious. It's two slits, for fuck's sake. Okay, what's the mystery? You shoot the laser through, you see the results, you accurately describe what you see. And they can't do that? It's too much of a challenge? No, it's obviously against their religion. And that's why they're doing. Jerry Falwell will be very, very proud of this video. This is a great example of how to defend a religion. It's a horrible example of what scientists should be doing with their time. I just can't. The Feynman video is so bad, right? And that's held up like, but that was the 60s, for fuck's sake. Okay, mistakes, you can understand that they don't bother doing the experiment. They just listen to the jibber jabber that comes out, and people say things and they say, oh, okay, that's what it does. Wow, that's really interesting. But there's no excuse now. And when you think of all the people that watch this video, it's no doubt edited. There's no doubt. And none of them could have said, hey, that video is really poor scientific quality. There's actually no science in it. It's just absolute pile of shit propaganda. And you really shouldn't be making videos like that with government money. I just look at all this. They got links. Okay, they don't say anything about who is a contributor to this production. I'm sure Dr. Lincoln didn't do this graphic and all this other stuff. But anyway, so it's just I can't say, there's no words to describe just how amazingly bad this is. It surprised the hell out of me how bad this is. I expected some clever veiling of the mystery, some clever, perversion of language to try to create the illusion of a mystery. This is stupid. It's not even close to clever. It's just out and out garbage. And people will fall for it because the sheeple are so sheeply. I mean, they're just so bad. But I just can't believe there's nobody listening to this video. I won't say nobody, but so few people who have enough intellectual integrity to say this is not what science should look like.
Quantum mechanics is probably the most mind-blowing theory of all of modern physics. In many explanations, cats are...
Okay, mind-blowing theory in all the history of mankind, blah, 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 blah. I mean, just hyperbole, little bullshit. I will take the speed off of that, but that's a little much. We'll just go down to 125. And then he brings up Schrodinger's cat and all of that. And again, if you know the back history, this is an argument against quantum mechanics made, showing how ludicrous it is that the idea of the cat being alive or dead at the same time is silly. That's the real argument. There, it was done to pwn the physics, to point out how silly it was, and they've somehow resurrected it into, yeah, that's a real possibility. No, it really isn't a real possibility.
Simultaneously alive and dead, and the outcome of experiments depends on a person looking at the experiment.
Right, which was the Dr. Quantum video. So, and you're coming just as close to that nonsense, right? You're zooming right into that focus of let's go all religion. I mean, we're already 98% of religion. Let's just kill the last 2% and go completely wooey and say our minds are controlling reality. La 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 la. We'll have that as a scientific theory.
Those last two things are kind of sketchy explanations that quantum practice...
Oh yeah, they're just sketchy. They're not complete out and out nonsense. They're not ridiculous. That our minds are controlling the physics. That's not absolutely ridiculous. That's just sketchy.
Practitioners have long since abandoned. However, there are a real series of quantum measurements that are just staggeringly bizarre.
Okay, so he says it. These are quantum measurements that are staggeringly bizarre. They just, it's just too freaking impossible. It's just too... No, it's none of that. It's an on-off pattern. The simplest pattern the universe can produce, and you can go, hey, that's a pattern. It's, it's the simplest one.
And totally worth talking about.
Yes, propagandizing about, because you're not going to talk about it. You don't interact with any of the arguments. You really don't interact with the thing called evidence. You don't care. It's all just part of your religious story. So he's going to tell us the fable of the Holy Ghost. That's really all it should be called. The fable of the Holy Ghost and the two-slit experiment. They should be put in the same category. Look, we're profound. We're doing profound things. And talking absolute crap.
Probably the simplest measurement to understand the weirdness of quantum mechanics is the double slit experiment.
Okay, no. It's the perfect way to understand how science is full of crap. That they do crappy science. It makes it perfectly understandable. If the modern scientist can make such a mess out of this two-slit experiment, then you can understand why, they screwed up that kinetic energy 200 years ago. With their silly clay experiments. Jeez, that was so nonsensical. And then you can understand how, that Eddington experiment wasn't really too good, was it? And they really never proved any of that crap. And Einstein was just making up, It's a nice little fable, the little bent space thing. It sounds, that's interesting, bent space, wow. But it's not a physics theory. Because there's no physics in it. There's no mechanism. The space is just magically kind of bented and stuff. Nothing is doing something. How magical for you.
And by simplest, I don't mean simple. I mean that it's at least possible.
It is simple, and it's so stunningly simple that even an idiot could figure out the right answer. The For Dummies book got the right answer.
To understand how the experimental outcome depends on a relatively few simple knobs.
That's right. There's very few variables. The distance to the target, the width of the little slitty things. And you don't even put the width of the slits in your math, right? So the math you're going to describe, you don't even bother with the slits. They're not even important. All that matters is the thing in the middle somehow. Somehow you describe two slits, that is two openings, one over here and one over here, by just describing this. And who cares about those outside things? They're not part of the equation. They can't be a variable, could they? Could they be a variable in the experiment? Could they cause effects? No. It's so bad.
In the apparatus. So how does the double slit experiment work? Well, basically, you shine light on two slits, and the light passes through them, and you...
So this is the first, oops, I've jumped. Okay, so they jump to a conclusion that the openings are the important part. So there's two things to that experiment, right? There's the white space that has walls in it, right? And then there's the dark space with the openings. And you're trying to figure out which part is the significant bit, right? The opening are the walls that aren't an opening, right? And they just jump to the conclusion that the only thing that could matter is the opening part, right? The walls can't be doing anything important. Yeah. So you make that mistake, and then you're going to go down a road of mistakes. So this is where you have a choice. Go left, be smart. Go right, be dumb. And you chose badly.
See what pattern appears on a distant screen. The easiest way to do it is to shine a laser at two parallel slits and see what pattern you see on a distant wall.
Yes, and to change change the variables and see what changes, and you can deduce the outcome. So Newton did this experiment. So let's all understand Newton had already figured all of this out long before Young, 200 years before him, well, 150 years before him. And so this wasn't a mystery in 1800s. It's really not a mystery now. This is a long-known effect that light is affected by surfaces. And that's what should be stated sensibly. That's what Newton was overtly pointing out. The aperture gets smaller, the light bends more. Okay, and he did it with both the impediment, the single hair, and the open aperture, and found both things create the pattern.
The laser passes through both slits, and the light going through...
So it doesn't pass successfully through both slits, and all of the fringe pattern, all of the light to the left and to the right, is not light that passed through the slit. It's light that hit the surfaces and was reconstructed. It's all fringe light. All of that light was only the photons that went by the surface. Now this pattern is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's sort of a, this isn't, again, they could do this scientifically and say this is an actual photograph of an actual pattern. All right, but it has to be a pattern made very strangely, because if you see, there's three nodes in the middle, okay, which means there isn't a very large difference between the surface distances. All right, that's the first takeaway. So the more nodes there are in the middle, the more difference there is between the dimensions of the outside slits, the outside surfaces versus the inside surfaces. So you have three in the middle, and you have two by yourself here, and then you have one over here. So in some respects, the mystery of the double slit has been preserved in the sense that you have these larger dark nodes, okay? And they are larger because they're actually supposed to be light nodes, but you can't see them because there's not a match of the four vectors from the four surfaces. That's the correct way to interpret the experiment. So it's quite obvious that these exist. This isn't just some linear pattern with one feature. It's a pattern that has more than one feature. You have these little nodes, and then you have these larger nodes, and you have to explain all of that. You can't just say, that doesn't happen. And the more you do the experiment in different ways, the more that becomes more obvious. So I would point out, I mean, people should agree who have some knowledge of the physics that this is a really underdeveloped photograph. Okay, this is like drawing a picture of the Eiffel Tower, like with just a straight line and saying it's the Eiffel Tower. You know you can construct something that's much more representative of the double slit pattern. Right, so somebody who's seen the pattern before knows you can make very square bars, and that the very square bars can be very many of them. You could have 100 of them, and they would be creating this obvious double slit pattern, which is there's two patterns. Does he show the real pattern, or does he show this meek version? Why is he showing the meek version of the pattern? Oh, that's right, because he wants you not to see the actual features of the pattern. It's lying. He had the choice to put the really interesting pattern on the screen or this dull pattern. Why did he choose the dull pattern? Because he can't explain the real pattern.
Each slit interferes with one another, and the result...
So we know that each slit doesn't interfere with each other. So if you use that math, the two-wave math does not get accurate answers. It will not predict what's on the screen ever. It just won't do it. It can't get the right answer because the centers are not in the center of the opening. The vectors that are creating that pattern, that will accurately describe that pattern, cannot be drawn from the center of the opening. Those vectors will not produce this pattern. So it's just, again, what do you call that? They're saying they did the experiment. We're technical people. We have billions of dollars worth of apparatus. Of course we can do this accurately. We measured it. It's true. Did they do that? No. Okay, they're just reciting out of their Bible. The Bible story says this is the narrative you teach. This is the narrative you talk. It has nothing to do with the truth.
is a series of bright and dark lines on the screen.
Yeah, well, that's not what it is. And so, again, anyone honest would say that's a feeble and silly description of the actual double slit pattern. It's not that simple.
Where the peak of the wave of light going through one slit coincides with a trough of light going...
Says you. So, again, this is the part where they just give you the one, well, this is what we think happens. And again, it's not accurate, okay? If you draw these waves, these lines, these dotted lines to represent frequency, wavelength, and you were to draw them on a piece of paper, you will not predict the pattern accurately. Because the pattern isn't being created by the opening. It's being created by the surfaces.
Through the other slit, the result is a dark spot.
All right, so we just did these arrow things, pretending all these dark spots are the same size. You actually do the experiment, you show the actual other images, it'll become glaringly obvious, okay, that this spot here is a missing node, and this spot here is more than maybe two missing nodes. All of that becomes really obvious. And if you do it on the correct screen, which is a radius from, the distance is a radius, that is, you project it on a curved screen, all of these dots will be the same size. They will diminish in intensity, but they will be of the same shape and form and size.
If peaks or troughs from both slits line up, then you get a bright spot. You can see similar...
So you could see where they drew the arrows and there was a lack of symmetry in the arrows, right? They were a little closer together in the middle and then a little closer together over here and a little closer together over here. So he's totally ignored that feature, that there's no consistency in that. There's no linear consistency in the pattern, that it has a defect in it. And obviously it's a really important defect.
Behavior if you just use water waves.
All right, so he just said it again. And water waves don't produce the same pattern. If you use the math you use to predict water waves, you will not get the correct answer with light. It doesn't work. Because the light is not, unlike the water, which does come from the center of the opening, the wave is the radius of the wave is created at the center of the opening. Unlike water, light is not doing that. It's not a fact. It's not even close to a fact. It's never been a fact. And for 200 years, the worst of the scientists have been telling this lie. These are the highest paid. These are scientists that should be way, way, way above falling for fables. They should be way above telling us the Holy Ghost lineage. It should be the most unimportant of arguments to make. No, you don't even go there. It's too silly.
After a wave passes through the slits, there are places in the water where the waves are big.
So this is an absolutely horrible illustration of anything. So this is just, I'll make some noise in water and it'll go all over the place and look not very interesting. So they couldn't find a better way to illustrate a wave tank than this piece of crap.
In places where there are no waves at all. The first version of this experiment with two slits was performed back in 1801.
So we know that the first version really was performed in 1648 or something by Isaac Newton. And that's the truth. He discovered this effect, and Young didn't do anything but just combine this experiment with this. Newton did this experiment, and then Newton did this experiment. And he just combined the two into one experiment. Okay. That's the extent of the contribution. And the very thing that makes it different, that is the very features of the pattern that Young didn't even see, because his version of the experiment was so crude and so bad that he couldn't even see the double pattern. So he just saw the on-off. He didn't see the on-off and then another envelope of on-off that it was inside. And so he didn't even add the value that would be the real value of doing this. The difference between this and this is the fact that you are creating those two patterns. And obviously, maybe you could figure out there's two patterns because you're making four surfaces.
By British polymath Thomas Young. His work showed that light acts like a wave.
Okay, so we know his work was just an illusion, and it was pretty much a failure. So again, this is more science. They put up the portrait. They give you this story. This is like they could be talking about Eddington. They could be talking about something, and in the future, they're going to know that this was bad physics. This was a mistake, and so they've iconized garbage, junk. And they just keep doing it. And they should be way past doing it because there's already actual people in physics. There are a few physicists who have actually realized that this isn't the truth, that this Young diagram isn't correct. It doesn't get the right answers. You have to do better than that.
Countless physics students reproduce this experiment each year.
Okay, they don't reproduce the experiment, and they don't measure it, and they don't do any of that. So if they did any of it, they would find out really rapidly that, oh yeah, it's a radius, so I have to do this on a curved surface. The math is predicting a curve in space. The math isn't predicting the pattern on a flat surface. So right away you're in trouble if you're not acknowledging that fact, that the math doesn't predict a flat surface. It predicts a curved surface. And if you do your measurements and do the experiment and then measure exactly how far apart the lights are and how big the nodes are, you'll find that if your analysis is based on Young's drawings, you will not be getting the right answer.
Introductory laboratories. So what happens if there is only one slit, not two? In that case, there's no interference.
I mean, amazing. So, I should play the Professor Lewin clip in here, but let's just, you're smart people. I shouldn't have to do that. I shouldn't have to go through the antics of showing you this stuff. But he obviously does a variable single slit. And he says, as he makes the slit narrower and narrower, he goes, the pattern's getting wider and wider and wider, right? Right? So he's pointing out how their nodes are turning into just one node, and then one node is getting wider and wider and wider, the narrower the slit. Clearly, he overtly states in the beginning of one of his videos that there's no reasoning, there's no logic to saying single slits do diffraction and double slits do interference. It's not logically sensible. What is diffraction if it's creating a pattern, how is it doing it? There's no mechanism for light to create a pattern through some other mechanism than interference. So what's the special mechanism that's creating on-off diffraction? Diffraction is spreading. Diffraction is an on-off pattern. And clearly everybody who's ever done the single slit experiment knows I can make 50 of those little dots. Okay, it's an on-off pattern. It's an interference pattern. It's not something called, it's just diffraction. No, it's a lot more than just diffraction. So this is a preposterous lie. It's just so bad. I mean, you don't even have to do, you can do the experiment incredibly badly and you'll see more than that single dot. And you'll never see the single dot. Because to see a single dot, you have to eliminate all the other bands, which means you have to make the slit incredibly narrow, so you're creating an incredibly large central maxima. So you'll never see a single dot like that. This is just, again, a lie. This is a distortion. This isn't even a distortion. This is so perverse and distant from reality. It never happens. That single dot never happens. Because if you see the single dot, you'd see the one next to it, and the one next to it, and the one next to it, and the one next to it. You can't ever create just the single maxima, the center maxima, and nothing else. It's not practically possible. If you're going to see the center dot, you're going to see it big, very long, very stretched. So just another piece of garbage, fake evidence, fake physics, terrible science from Fermilab. Government sponsored and paid for horrible crap.
This stems from the fact that light has only one source. And if you have some physics training, you'll realize that I'm ignoring diffraction here.
So he's ignoring diffraction, whatever that means. I'm ignoring diffraction, which is the spreading of light, which is the whole concept, really, right? And the fact that the light's spreading in these different locations and that there's overlap in the locations, and that's what's actually creating the pattern. So I'm going to ignore the most important feature of what this whole experiment is creating, which is the spreading of light. That is, different vectors it could possibly take. So every interpretation, Copenhagen, no matter which one, many worlds, many universes, all that crap, they all depend on this diffraction thing being a reality, this spreading. And he's just going to gloss over it and say, well, let's not get into that. So does that make any sense? I mean, is that doing good physics? Good physics is to ignore the most important thing the experiment's actually doing to the light. It diffracts it first, and then it interferes. That's your theory, idiots. So of course you have to talk about diffraction first, because that's, you can't have any interference until you diffracted the light. Duh.
It just simplifies the discussion. And this whole thing is complicated enough that...
No, it's not complicated. That's the whole point. It's a double slit experiment or a single slit experiment. You can't get much simpler than this. And you're struggling to explain it because you believe in a bunch of cartoon characters. You're trying to force gremlins and hobgoblins and trolls. And, you're living in some sort of, the Three Kings world or something. Some world full of little people. And rings and things.
We need as much simplification as possible. Okay, to recap. With light...
Recap? Recap what? Well, it's like recapping A. Well, let's recap. A.
We can have one slit or two. If we have one slit, we don't have bands of light on a distance.
All right, so just terrible, right? We don't have bands of light. I mean, it's just such a lie. I mean, just such an insanely silly and stupid lie. I mean, it's, you can't even, I'm stunned. This is so bad. So they still want to argue that this has something to do with two slits, and the photons breaking in two, or some kind of going through both of the slits, and that the photon needs the slits to know it's supposed to break into two, when we know the single slit already does that. The single slit somehow already creates two interfering vectors. So the only way you can solve for the single slit pattern is to do exactly the same vector math, which means there has to be two sources. So obviously, if there's 2 slits, there must be 4 sources. If there's 2 sources in the single slit, there must be 4 sources in the double slit. That's complicated?
Discrete. If we have 2 slits, we do. This pretty much proves that light is a wave. Now let's start talking.
Okay, you just said it, right? This pretty much proves it. I don't have to do any more propagandizing, do I? I proved it with this great propaganda. I told a ludicrous story, and you believe it, and so I'm done, and I've proved it. And you asked by preposterous numbers, right? 1,000 to 1. Well, no, okay, 100 to 1. People are approving. Oh, thumbsy ups, you're doing such marvelous work there at your little scientific place. Thanks a lot for telling me nothing useful and propagandizing and lying to me because I'm a dumb shit and I deserve that. Dude, I'm a smart person. I'm got me educated. I'm highly educated. I don't fall for bullshit. Except every day. Fuck. This is so painful being on this planet. Your brains are festering. They have putrid rot. They're obviously in advanced decomposition if you're falling for this crap.
Talking about tricky stuff. We know from other experiments that light is also a particle, and
okay, so this again, we proved it's a wave and we proved it's a particle. So it's a wave, a particle. Our part of the wave, y'all. We proved it. So it's just like, why doesn't Jerry Falwell, if he was alive, let's dig up Jerry Falwell and we'll put him in front of a blackboard with a bunch of gibberish on it and he can tell you all kinds of fantastic stories and it'll be science. Yeah. So this is just, he might as well just change your name to Jerry Falwell.
Particles of light are called photons. That is its own mind-blowing thing because
mind-blowing again. So they write it in the script. More mind-blowing. We're mind-blowing. We're blowing the minds. We're groovy. And we're incredibly neato. Oh, that's not modern enough? Oh, I'm neato. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm supposed to say something hippie. Yeah, just... I mean, he's obviously desperately trying to be stylish here. Whatever this suit is made out of, plastic. I mean, who the hell knows? No tie though. Yeah, because I'm modern and hip. Can't touch this. Da 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 da. This is so bad. How did I get on this goddamn planet of the rotting brain?
Waves and particles seem to be so different, but let's just accept this fact. Proving it would require its own bit.
Oh yeah, just proving something would just require you to have a little bit of integrity. It wasn't that hard to prove. You could just show actual pictures of the actual experiment, and then you could do the actual measurement, and then you could actually just tell the truth that, hey, it appears that the distance between the surfaces is completely controlling where the pattern is. Yep. It appears the surfaces are somehow important, and the opening part, not very important at all.
So what would we expect if light acted like a particle when it went through the double slits?
So this is as far as I got. I mean, I was just about to throw up, and I just couldn't watch anymore, so this will be all new to me. This new fun part.
Well, a particle is like a BB or a marble or something. The particle would go through one slit or the other, but not both.
So that part we could all say, okay, that makes sense. And guess what? Photons are doing exactly the same thing. They're going through one slit or the other. And the fact is what the photon is actually something you could break into pieces. So this is the place that, again, invented quarks. So they could understand that a proton is made out of sub-elemental parts. Now, I don't think that it is, but regardless. They could understand that. They can understand an atom being made out of electrons and protons. Then they can understand the proton as being made out of quarks. But they can't understand a photon being BBs with a frequency, like 4 of them, 4 BBs. And it goes into the slit, and the slit sends one of the BBs this way, and one of the BBs that way, and one of the BBs that way, and one of the BBs that way. But at the same time, all the other surfaces are also sending pieces to all those places. And if we reconstruct pieces from different photons, we can remake another photon. There's a 50-50 chance because they're all in phase. And you're just reconstructing the phase based on the path length difference. That's inconceivable to him. It's not possible.
The resulting pattern on a distant screen would be 2 patches where the particles hit, and the rest of the screen would have no hits.
So that's also nonsense. So he doesn't draw it, but that's the old Feynman nonsense, right? So we know when it goes to the screen, the fringe pattern's getting magnified. That is, it's enlarged because it is diverging. But if it went straight through the slits, it wouldn't diverge. And so that means the 2 patterns would just be a millimeter different. So on a 3-foot screen, you'd have a millimeter of difference between the 2 patterns. It'd be so close to in the same place that you really couldn't see the difference. So that's the actual fact. So again, they just go with the fable instead. Facts, who cares, not really important. You know, the F fable word just as good. So just you know, any place to use an F, just put fable. Yeah.
But the actual double slit behavior doesn't look like that. So that's why people say that light is a wave, although there are...
Okay, we know it doesn't look like that, but that doesn't look like that. So we know whatever I throw through the slits, that some of the things will hit the surface and they'll be deflected. So they will diverge. They'll do exactly what the light does, which is diverge. And we'll get a pattern on the wall. We'll get some of them that'll hit the edge and bounce off. So we will get divergence in the pattern. We will get the possibility of 2 vectors matching. And all you have to do is understand that we're throwing trillions of these things, and there's lots of them in the slit at any one time, and they're going to, you know, be able to have a sequence of events that'll add up to a photon.
Other measurements that I'm not going to describe here that prove equally strong.
So again, we have measurements that equally strongly prove it's a particle. So he just keeps making this argument. Somehow this experiment proves it's a wave, and the other magical experiments prove the particle. They're both, he can't describe either experiment correctly, and like even their photoelectric analysis is wanting. So, you know, as much as I'm arguing it is a particle, their explanation for why it's a particle is kind of silly in the sense that they're basically using a particle detector. And so, of course, everything they detect is going to look like a particle because their detector can only see particles, clumps.
Believe that light is a particle. Einstein got his Nobel Prize for that insight.
Yeah, it's not too good, actually. The insight is, like I said, I'm for the conclusion. I'm not too much for exactly how it was argued. The conclusion, I think, is absolutely correct, but Einstein didn't get there exactly clean.
Okay, now we can start monkeying around with the double slit experiment. What happens if we set up a detector around the 2 slits?
Oh, God. You know, you're just... Now, see, this is the kind of thing that just can't happen, right? Richard Feynman said this crap, and he starts off talking as if, I'm just talking shit, okay? I've just made this part up, what if? And then there's other parts where he's talking like we actually did the experiment. So it's sort of like when Ronald Reagan was going senile, you know, he would think he was the people in the movies he made, you know, and he lost his leg in a train accident and all this, you know. He'd be, you know, sitting there telling you, I lost my leg in a, wait a minute, my leg's still there. I lost it though, and they must have sewed a new one on. You know, that kind of thing. And, you know, and so this is just horribly tragic. They have absolutely no theoretical reasoning to justify ever even thinking you could detect a photon. It's an insane, nonsensical thing. There's absolutely no possible way to detect passively a photon. Photons, to be something, have to hit something and cause an energy reaction. We can only detect them by them hitting something and making it move, and then we can see the other thing moving. We have to amplify the movement. That's the only way we can see them. So of course we're going to change what they're doing because we're throwing something in their way. You can only detect them by tripping them and forcing them to fall on the ground. Of course they're not going to get to 7-Eleven. They just fell on the ground. Shit. So it's not even theoretically possible. There's absolutely no chance. So again, this is Dr. Quantum propaganda, lie. This, like I said, distortions this egregious have to just be called lies. There's no reason to believe this nonsense. No evidence, no theoretical possibility. It's just a story. We asked 15 gremlins what they think of, munchy cereal. And the 15 gremlins said, well, half of them liked it and half of them, threw it back at the guy who asked the question. This is a fake physics. This is fake science.
To see if the photon goes through one slit or the other. That shouldn't happen with a wave, but it does with a photon. And if you do that, the pattern on the distant screen looks like it's a particle.
So that never happened. And obviously, if you did try to detect it, you'd be shooting energy at the particle, and the particle wouldn't go back to being normal. It would be distorted by whatever way you were pushing the energy. So if I had energy wind, and I was trying to blow the photons and see them with the wind, they would be blown in a different direction. They wouldn't go back to normal. They would go something else. So again, just more. They can't get past A, B. Oh, now I got. What is the next letter? I mean, they can't get little simple details right.
So this is definitely weird. In the past...
No, there's no weirdness. Fake story, fake physics, fake science, fake news, fake, fraud, phony, bullshit. Propaganda for a religion. Quantum mechanics is a religion. This is just a well-paid little preacher in... he probably sings in the choir every Sunday.
People have interpreted this as saying that photons act like waves when you're not looking at them, but particles when you are. In the 1930s...
So, absolute evil nonsense, and you've just recited it, the seeds in people's heads for no good reason, because nobody rational said it that way. Nobody rational intended you to believe that when we are physically looking at them. No, when you interact with them. So again, there was no experiment done, no detector experiment, no conclusion, no reason to ever say when we're analyzing them, they do something different than when we're not looking at them. There's no reason to say it because we never did it. It's just absolute insane nonsense.
These people talked about the influence of human consciousness on quantum mechanics.
Yeah, these people, right. People who are well-educated lunatics. Again, there was a few things Hitler did right, but he did other things so preposterously wrong that he has no credibility as a thinking machine. And these people are likewise, Bohr and whatever the other asshole is, these people are likewise too crazy, okay, to take seriously. You don't trust them. Okay, because they are wooicists. They are religious kookicists. They're trying to force your science into being a religion. Ugh. Leibniz was a clever guy, Leibniz. But he did in fact fake documents. He did in fact steal Newton's calculus. He did in fact create a woo physics. He did in fact overtly force physics to be religion,
which has persisted for nearly a century in some communities. Science has long since discarded the special nature.
So here, we've long since discarded. You haven't even discarded your fables and your fake premises and your silly notion that diffraction, we won't talk about diffraction because that's something else entirely. Photons. making interference patterns by diffracting. Yeah, they make an interference pattern by diffracting. Yeah, it's a on-off diffraction. It's well-known feature thing. Seen it many times myself. Outside of an airplane window, I've seen it. Yes. There's another airplane, a sign that said that's what the truth was, and
of human consciousness in quantum physics, but it certainly started a cottage industry of quantum woo with such books as The Tao of Physics.
So quantum woo, and this guy has just wooed. I mean, the whole fucking video is woo. He hasn't said anything that wasn't woo in this video, and he's going to call other people wooists.
The Dancing Woolly Masters, and a lot of things said by modern-day television personality Deepak Chopra.
Why don't you put Dr. Quantum in there? Oh, that's right, because you think Dr. Quantum was a real physicist. You're the cartoon guy.
None of these reflect current physics thinking.
Oh, whatever. There's no current thinking except how can we keep getting paid to just tell the silliest stories the human race could ever come up with. We'll make gods that are so ridiculous and people will love it. Yeah, mechanical theories that make no sense at all. We'll tell them the bent space, the nothing, is bent. Yeah. It's really cool. I can bend nothing. The nothing will tell the something what to do. And they'll fall for it.
Woo aside, the mind-bending behavior of photons gets weirder still.
So, I mean, he hasn't gotten to anything yet, right? And he's missed what, frankly, over the last 20 years or so, because of laser beams and doing the experiment a lot of times, they have sort of figured out, oh yeah, this math is a little more complicated. You have to use the 4 surface math and do some integrals and blah, blah, blah. But you really don't, because you could just draw it, and you can model it perfectly by just drawing it.
Let me walk you through this cranial catastrophe.
Oh boy, so bad. So he just walked us through brain rot, and now he's going to talk about some kind of catastrophe.
It turns out to be possible to turn down the intensity of a light source so low that only one...
Oh, now we're doing the single photon bullshit. And absolute bullshit. As I pointed out by playing the Veritasium video, you can see the bullshit. He couldn't get it to work unless he turned the photo detector way up. And why did it work when he turned it way up? Is because he had to shorten how long the experiment took because he turned the error photons way up, so he had to do it quicker. And by doing this, the experiment faster, that is, more photons in, okay, then he got a result, which means he had less likelihood that there were single photons in the experiment. So they don't have any single photon gun. They have no single photon creation theory. They have no evidence that they can make a single photon. None of it has any credibility as science. And here he's going to talk about it. Like, this is part of what convinces us, this non-science, because we're religious kooks.
One photon is
wearing a plastic suit.
emitted at a time. What happens when you shoot a series of those photons at a double slit experiment and don't look to see what slit it went through? Will it act like a particle or a wave? Now I need to be honest and say, although this experiment has been done with photons, it was first done using electrons.
And is absolute nonsense, even with electrons. Single electron, no, sorry, no real chance.
Electrons, like photons, have both a wave and a particle nature.
No, they don't. They have charge, and that explains why they behave funny when you push them next to a surface.
This means that qualitatively, the electron experiments can stand in for photons. And
oh, see, here he goes. So that's just all part of the lie, right? We're just going to pretend it's all the same thing. Water's the same as bananas, is the same as this, is the same. It's all the same thing. It's not all the same thing. It's the simplest pattern in the universe. Different things will create a pattern for different reasons, and only a fool would think it's all for the same reason.
In 1986, Philippe Grangier, Gerard Roget, and Alain Aspect
Oh, so here we go. Now we're moving right into entanglement. So we went right from slits and interference patterns to their own little personal fun theory of they must be wooey particles. They must be entangled. They must know what each other is doing. So another experiment hasn't really been repeated, okay, because Aspect won't even release his spinning mirror patent. So you can't actually do the experiment he did because he won't let you make the spinning mirror.
An equivalent experiment with photons. I put a URL of their actual paper if you want some late night.
Yeah, if you want some more junk science, okay, where they have 9 million assumptions in going into the experiment. So this is one where they're using polarizers, okay, to define what the light is. They don't know what polarizers are doing. They don't even understand how they work. And the assumption is that the polarizers are 50-50. That, I put one this way, it's 50% of the light. I put one this way, it's 50% of the light. Turns out it doesn't work that way. Okay, turns out that, and especially when I put a third one in, that, I change the percentages. The fact is that the photons you can create is not linear. As you get closer to one edge, the amount increases. When you get closer to the other edge, the amount increases, and it's less in the middle. So they think an answer should be 75 when physically what it really is 66. And they say, oh, because it came out 75, therefore there's an anomaly that we have to blame ESP photons for. When the physics is you should expect the 66 number. That actually is the right answer, because as you change the filters, you don't have a linear relationship. I don't know how. There's probably a better way to say this, but it just has to do with some things. It's like opening a hole in a dam. Like it's get bigger and bigger, it gets wider and wider. So as you change the radius, it gets proportionally larger and larger area of water that's getting through. That's what should be expected. That's not an aberration. That's the actual performance. And because they don't understand how a polarizing filter works, they made wrong assumptions and said we've proven a violation of a fundamental principle, when if you actually did the real experiment with polarizers, you'd realize there is no violation. So the whole thing is a piece of crap.
Time reading, and by light I mean heavy. And I also added a link to a URL of a paper that details how to do the experiment with university undergraduate laboratory equipment. Just in case someone out there wants to check on what I'm saying.
Yeah, why don't you do that with the slit experiment? Show us the link to the experiment where you measured the actual outcome on the target. Why don't you show me the link to the experiment where they actually have your math, your measurements, and you actually prove those measurements are actually what's produced on the screen. Oh, that's right, because it doesn't exist. Thank you.
So what happened? Well, when the photon is aimed at the two slits, and if light were acting like a wave, you'd expect a very faint interference pattern to appear. Then, with each photon, the interference pattern will get brighter and brighter.
Obviously, it's not what you'd expect, because you'd have no reason to expect it. Okay. But the truth is, there's just no good experiment demonstrating this effect, because the whole idea of a single photon is troubling. And then the whole idea of how you make single photons, if you were to try to make them, is that you're putting a bunch of this in front of photons. You're making a bunch of little slit experiments. So you're breaking a lot of photons, and then you can remake them. So again, there's perfectly reasonable explanations for the phenomenon, and yet they keep jumping to the most extraordinary explanation.
But that's not what we see. Instead, we see that the photon is detected as a single spot on the screen. That's definitely the behavior.
That's always true. So whether the photons are coming in one at a time or they're coming in as multiple photons, we already know that's what we're detecting, because we already know that's how photographic film works. You have to hit the film with the photon, the little piece of chemical. Okay, and you turn it on or you turn it off. So we already know photons land as discrete clumps of energy. You don't need this analysis, the single photon analysis, to demonstrate that truth.
Behavior you expect from a particle. So that's pretty weird. We now have two instances where light acts like a particle in the double slit experiment. If what I said seemed weird, what I'm about to say pegs the bizarrometer.
Okay, so I mean, they just keep, you know, going one step. You know, let's be even more ludicrous, more idiotic, and we'll just keep talking about what we're doing as if we're proving the bizarro religion. We're proving bizarro exists in the universe. It's full of bizarro. There's lots of bizarro and magico and you know, mystification. You know, they're just trying to prove that reality is this magical place full of bizarro.
What happens when we send another photon through? Well, just like the first one, it appears in a single spot. But what happens with the third, fourth, hundredth, millionth, and zillionth photon? You see that they start building up a pattern.
Alright, let's just understand they really don't have an experiment where they have demonstrated in any real clinical way that that actually happens. That they have single photons in the experiment. That there's only one photon and it goes through one slit and that's all that happens. Truth is, if you're going to get a pattern, you're going to have elements of photons on both surfaces and in the double slit on all four surfaces, or you're not going to get a pattern. And that's what the Veritasium experiment demonstrates. If you do the experiment correctly, assuring that there's one photon, you don't get any pattern.
Should recognize. What you see is the traditional interference pattern seen by Thomas Young way back in the early 18th.
So again, it's not Young's experiment. Thomas Young didn't see these secondary envelope pattern. He didn't analyze the secondary envelope pattern, didn't explain the secondary envelope pattern, just as you have not explained it. So again, just a huge, egregious, we'll just pretend it doesn't happen. When it's an outstanding feature, it's what makes the double slit different than the single slit, is that fact that there's two patterns.
Hundreds. So this is extraordinarily weird. It seems that individual photons travel through both slits, yet they are detected like a...
No, it's none of that seems, none of that has to be believed. If you take another 10 minutes of thought, you might be able to come up with some different answer, but you didn't want to think for 10 minutes because you love this silly answer. The silly answer is what you're after. Supporting your silly religion is what you're trying to do. You're just Jerry Falwell's clone. Okay, you're just doing the same crap. You're just lying to people, making up silly stories, you know, to try to defend a silly story. It's just silly stories in defense of a silly story.
Particle, and also seem to be governed by the mechanics of waves. Light truly has wave and particle properties.
No, it doesn't. And the whole thing is silly. Yeah. The waves are emergent, okay? So bullets can wave. Basketballs can wave. Baseballs can wave. Okay? But there's no way you're going to do the opposite. Okay? You're not going to make a wave particle.
Now, the first thing I want to say is that what I've told you here are experimental facts. There's no question.
All right, so there is a huge question. To say that is just such an outrageous lie that you have done anything to prove the integrity of these statements, that these statements are overwhelmingly demonstrated by the evidence, that the experiments can only be interpreted this one stupid, silly way. That's just a terrible lie. He's basically trying to emphasize to these morons that, no, trust me, we've really done this. We really know our physics. When this is cartoon. This is Horton Hears a Who storytelling. There's no reality in this story. There's no real physics in this story.
These things happen. These can't be denied.
Yeah, they can be. Your detector experiment, yeah, it can be denied. Every one of your drawings, yeah, it can be denied that the truth doesn't look like that. Every bit of what you said in this video is crap. And it can be denied by a reasonable person as just being crap you made up. Because it doesn't have anything to do with science, experiments, and fair and reasonable conjecture.
The real question is, what story is the data telling us? That's where things get more complicated. There is the shut up and calculate school of thought, which...
Yeah, Dopey Feynman, who thinks there's a random God. So he's overtly religious. He thinks the universe just makes things randomly happen. They poof. Okay, so if I take exactly the same universe, freeze it, and then I de-thaw it, each time I de-thaw the frozen clone, it'll do something different because the random god will make it a different person. La 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 la.
Says that you shouldn't ask what's going on. The theory predicts the result, and that's good enough.
It doesn't predict it. It doesn't get the right answer. And obviously Feynman, as I've demonstrated, was profoundly ignorant on the facts of the double slit experiment. He didn't know there was two patterns. He apparently didn't know there were two patterns. The envelope pattern. Didn't even know it was a concept.
Then there is pilot wave theory, which has particle photons surfing waves of probability.
Right, and they might as well just say it's pushed by bent space riding a skateboard. You know, no physics again. It's piloted by, invisible magical pilots. What else? Of course, there's magical pilots.
Which guide the photons to their arrival point on the screen. The many worlds interpretation essentially...
Oh, yeah, so let's just go way wacky and just say everything that changes that we don't want to explain, it's because it's a different universe. So, of course, it's differently different. The universes are all differently different, and that makes them all special, and so it's the special verse. We're living in the special big place with the special verses. And of course, they're all diverse and different because that's a fun feature.
Says that all possible outcomes are predicted, and the photon simply follows one of the paths, meaning that there is no tension between the wave and particle nature of light.
Yes, because I can invent anything if I can invent any place to put it. So if I make enough rug, I can sweep every error under it. I just have to make more rugs so I can sweep the errors into them.
There are many interpretations of quantum mechanical data. You can look at the Wikipedia to see the smorgasbord.
Yeah, you can see more crap, okay? More little lies, little lie here, little lie there. But you didn't read the Wikipedia page. Because the Wikipedia page will tell you, hey, you know what? This is the math that actually gets the right answer. Yeah, so sort of pay attention to this one. And there's actually 4 vectors in the math, for the two-slit experiment. It's really about the surfaces. They're sort of whispering it. The Wikipedia page is going, yeah, it's really about the surfaces, but yeah, let's talk about the openings. It's really important. But, the surfaces are really doing it.
Of ideas available to you. And there's no lack of ideas that can reasonably be called fringe. I put a URL to the Wikipedia.
Oh, yes, we're all fringe. We're fringes. We're broken. We're garbage. We're stupid. And you have all the right answers with your big giant budget and your plastic suit. No, you're an incredible jerk who just made a really ignorant and dumb video, and you should be shamed into taking it down because it's so full of misinformation. There's so many distortions and lies in this video. You should be shamed into taking it down.
Page that lays out the more plausible options. I haven't told you which of the options is right because the jury is still out.
Oh, whatever that even means, right? So what he's really saying is that we, the physicists, some of us believe in many universes because we're silly. Not because there's any evidence. And then we believe in Copenhagen because we're silly. Not because there's any evidence. I mean, the fact is they can't make up their mind between all the silly answers. There's so many silly answers to choose from. I don't know, maybe I'll be a Christian or I'll be a Muslim. Maybe I'll be a Methodist or a Muslim. There must be Muslims. Yeah, maybe I could be one of those. I could be a Muslim on Wednesday and I could be a Christian on Thursday. It'll be like wave-particle duality. I'll be silly, stupid, fucktard duality. This is so fucking humiliating. You're humiliating the human intelligence here, pretending you're something called a scientist.
Few of the options are ruled out by the data, so we're kind of stuck in the position of saying, I don't know. By the way,
oh, what a pile of crap. That's not where we're stuck. No. So again, it's really easy to understand if you want to understand it. Again, it didn't take me very long to find the right answers.
In fact, I went into physics hoping to solve this quantum conundrum, but as I got into it, I saw just how hard it was. If a century of smart people thinking about it hasn't solved the problem, I probably wasn't going to either.
Oh, so he gave up and just said, I'll be a wooey shithead too. So isn't that hilarious? So that's very, that's just telling. It's sad, really. Because, yeah, he said, there's something, this needs explanation. This needs clarification. That's what he was probably saying. This needs clarification. There's got to be a right answer here. And, these people are honestly saying that they really tried to find it when they still don't even know what the pattern looks like. How could he's saying this was the thing that triggered him, and he's taking his picture behind all this technology, but obviously it didn't really trigger him, because if it did, he would have done the experiment. And he would have noticed, hey, wait a minute, the real double slit experiment is quite complex and intricate. And look, as I open the slits wider, I can make more and more of those little bars. Why is changing the distance between the surfaces making the bars more numerous? I mean, he could have figured this out, right, if he actually did the experiment. So this is sort of just storytelling. He didn't really try to answer this question. He got distracted by all the other little sparky crap. And, so, yeah, sad story.
So I went to particle physics, which was equally interesting and a field where I could make a difference, and, well, the rest is history.
Yeah, I don't know. Is it you made a historic difference? Are you part of the you found the mega quark or something? The Rembla quark, the Hobgoblin quark. Why don't you just give them real names? The ghost quark.
Even though the double slit experiment is mind-blowing, there's more to the story. In my next episode, I'll tell you about how we can pick which slit the photon went through, then erase that information.
Oh, yeah. So isn't that just too silly? Yes, that is too silly. He'll go deeper into the entanglement crapola. So he can't get two slits right, but now he's going to get interferometry and polarization and all these other subjects. He's going to figure all that out.
What happens in that case? Well, you'll have to watch the next video to find out. Well, that was certainly fun. Thinking about quantum mechanics is always a good way to make your head spin. If you like the video, please like, subscribe, and share on social media. We need more viewers.
Yeah, we need more viewers. We need to get this propaganda engine going. We need to sell this religion, boy. We need more people to donate. We need more money. We need more people talking about how great all this crap physics is. This absolute wooey nonsense. I need a new plastic suit.
And what kind of viewers do we want? Well, that's easy. We want viewers who know the great truth, which is that physics is everything.
All right. Physics is everything, except everything we're saying is just bullshit. Piles and piles of magical bullshit. It might as well just be a religion. What's the truth value of the book he's going to write compared to the Bible? I'm saying that if you go sentence by sentence, there's going to be just as much absolute bullshit. Just stuff he made up. Stuff that was made up. Stuff that never happened. Just complete crap as a description of reality. Because these are all wrong answers. Bent space is the wrong answer. Kinetic energy, wrong answer. Photons are wavicles, wrong answer. They're wrong on everything. The foundation is complete pus. It's garbage. You can't build on it. You can't build anything that isn't going to stink out of it. If you build, if you build it out of rotten corpse, it's going to stink really badly. I don't know, not a great metaphor. But anyway, complete and entire face palm for how bad can it get. I have to endeavor to persevere. That's all I can do. But it's so hard to accept that the world is run by people this fucking dishonest and stupid. You have to be both. Just being stupid isn't enough. You have to also really like to fuck the truth. Rape it. Brutally. All right, so that's all I can do, right? All right, so that was just horrible. So till the next time, I don't know if there's much point. Like I said, I don't know what it has to come to. They're such cowards. They can't defend this crap. They won't defend this crap. I can't pay them to grow some integrity. It's just so. Yeah, this sucks. You know. But I'm not the give up type, so I will fight to the death. So anyway, till the next time and such, this has been a Draft Science, honest and decent scientific video presentation.